Hey everyone. Woo! How was your weekend? How are you doing? How is everything appearing in your world today? And has this Arctic blast of air hit your area yet? Let me tell you what I woke up to yesterday morning. Sunday morning, I have my cup of tea. I stick a toe outside the door just to get a little fresh air, and I am blasted. It was frigid. And so I looked at what the temperature was, and it was a really nasty, hideous 18 degrees. Now, I live in Missouri. We're, kind of in the middle of the country. We don't really get 18 degrees until about January or so. Uh, 40s, 50s, that's usually pretty more normal for us. But Sunday, 18 degrees. I think we managed as a high to almost get above freezing, but it wasn't by much. So, you know, and like I said, I mean, if it was January, you would not only would I have expected 18 degrees, I would have known to be thankful for it because at least that would be double digits. And if that came without ice on the roads, total win. But it's a bit harsh for November, so I was not thrilled. And that led to this whole project of rushing around to get the winter clothes out of the closet, which was, a bit of a task. I hadn't done it yet because, last week I was having 70-degree days, which was weird. I see Amanda has a cold day here too. Whew, my full sympathies. I am here armed with a steaming cup of tea. I have gotten out the flannel. I have gotten out the fuzzy socks because when it changed, I mean the weather it really changed. But I also got the last final totes of my Yule decor all squared away. I have such an awesome system this year. Not only do I have everything put together according to project, everything I'm putting on the tree this year is on these totes and they're in the place where the tree is supposed to go. I have the kitchen stuff all separated out, the bedroom stuff. Everything is completely organized. I know what I'm doing. I have pre visualized. I have never been this organized in my life. So I have achieved the absolute seasonal goals because this means that I'm not driving my husband crazy with all of the Yule stuff the way I usually do. And the current surroundings of the house are in full Thanksgiving mode, so he can relax and enjoy his favorite holiday without seeing, glitter everywhere. But I also know that I have my stuff taken care of. So when the day comes, I'll just be executing my plan. It'll probably be faster, and I won't be driving my husband as insane, which means a happy home and a happy marriage. So, how about that? But now that I've rambled on enough to let people have some time to get into the room, let's get going on our Monday madness. First, I want to draw attention to my good friend Georgia Liberty, who is also acting as moderator in the chat today. So, trolls beware. She is handy with that block button and she doesn't put up with very much crap. So, you have been forewarned. But in addition to that, on her own channel, Wiccan Conservative, she is christening a series called Liberty Doctor Thursdays, which I am super excited about. We have a name, we have a series, we're doing the thing. And this week she has invited Puritan View, aka Amanda, both who's a good friend to both of our channels, and myself, and we're going to be discussing the Trump DeSantis issue because there's a little bit of static and liveliness out there. So we are going to be discussing that. Oh, Georgia left me a sweet comment. Okay. But without spoiling anything, we are going to be talking about, this conflict, and we'll probably discuss, how much of this is real, how much of this is just other people sticking their oars in trying to make it real. What's going on, what's motivating this, is this the time for the fight or, just where is the actual soul of the Republican Party or people who would be more inclined to vote for Republicans than Democrats. So we will get into all of that Thursday. So Wiccan Conservative channel on YouTube. Thursday, it'll be 12 p.m. Central, 1 p.m. Eastern. I hope you will join us there. Now, I want to bring something up that has been bugging me. A couple weeks ago, there was this article published in The Atlantic about how we need to have a COVID amnesty because apparently people are starting to get nervous and they don't want to be held accountable for their actions. Whether they were one of the people who was, pushing all of the propaganda and the hysteria and the panic onto people. Or if it was just, your next door neighbor who, didn't like how you were reacting, the choices you were making during the COVID era, and just, treated you really badly. Whether on the large scale or small, people seem to be getting nervous, which I have to admit makes me happy, because that means it has finally dawned on these morons that perhaps things were blown out of proportion. Perhaps not all of the information we received at the time was commiserate with the facts, I'll put it that way. And perhaps people might be a little bit irritated with them, and this could interfere with their lives being smooth. And I want to emphasize, that this is all about them, because they certainly weren't sorry for how they treated anyone. While they were doing that, they were not sorry about the fact that some people's businesses were shut down and completely destroyed. They were not sorry about just how family relationships and friendships and even relations between neighbors, that things got a bit touchy, and that there, as much as people like this, talk about how horrible judgment is, they were not bashful at handing out that judgment to anybody else. And some of us have memories and remember. And when I first heard about this article, it annoyed me, but I thought about, do I talk about it? Do I not? Do I bring it up later? Then the time seemed to have passed, but it kept coming up. And I thought, every time I hear about this, I'm a little bit more annoyed and I'm a little bit more angry, particularly when I hear normies essentially latching onto this idea. And, can't we just let bygones be bygones? No, I think we need some accountability. And I think we need to have some acknowledgement that these normies, in their desperate attempt to, conform and do what they were told because they thought it would save them, that they were active participants in the destruction and further division of our society. Normies are going to be the death of us. I have a little bit more patience for the opposition, because the opposition is not shy about making it clear that they are the opposition. They have different goals, they have a different vision, they have different methods, and they want what they want, and they're going to be going after that. And whether or not anyone likes that, is rather really neither here nor there. This is how they have seen ways for themselves to gain power, and usually money and influence and status, and that's what they're doing. As dishonest as they are at least honest about what they actually want. It's the normies, the people who would not listen to anyone else who knew better, who are begging for mercy now, or who don't want to be judged for how much they bent the knee, while other people were out there sacrificing, while other people were out there paying the price, taking the heat, and doing all the hard legwork. They want to collect on the benefits of the people who did all that sacrificing now, but they would not have anything to do with that sacrificing at the time, even if all the normies had stood up at the same time with people who were opposing the COVID madness and said, we're not doing this, you are going to stop. If they had done that, we could have won this. The insanity would have been over in the course of a few weeks. We would have put a nice leash onto all of the presumptuous politicians and the doctors who seem to be more pharmaceutical salesmen than they are men of medicine. We could have done all of that if the normies had acted in their own self-interest, and if they had listened to the people who were trying to preserve their rights as well as their own. Normies, if no one has said this to you before, it's time for you to hear it now. This is your fault. You are the cowards. You are the spineless jellyfish. You are the ones who allowed this to happen, and you are not a good person. It doesn't matter if you were scared. Everyone who stood up was scared. Everyone who dealt with this had something major to lose. They did it because it was the right thing to do, and they couldn't live with themselves if they didn't. So don't presume yourself to be on the same moral standing. And that saying about all that is required for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. I want to go a step further today. If you see something evil or catastrophically wrong in your society and you are doing nothing about it, then you don't get to count yourself as being a good person. You're not a good man. You're not a good woman. You're not a good kid. You are not of good character. You are part of the problem. And your apathy and complacency and cowardice has brought our society to where it is. Your hands are not clean. And while you might find some people on the left who would be inclined to say, oh, you poor baby, The opposition is so mean to you. Don't worry, we understand. They're using you. They are using you, and you are further alienating people like me who would have been very, very happy to stand in the front line if only you had seen fit to actually back us up. You didn't have to take the worst of it. You just had to stand in solidarity with those who had the guts to do it. You didn't. So, I just wanted all of you to know exactly where you stand. And speaking on the COVID front, I saw an interesting video on the Timcast channel today. It was apparently there are now studies being conducted about the possible side effects of, the little jabby jab, and how possibly there could be some myocarditis related issues. Yeah. You see, traditionally, I mean, call me old fashioned. I probably deserve that little label, but go with me. But in the olden days, what happened in the scientific and medical communities is that people had a hypothesis. They went through a series of testing, and at a certain point, if it was deemed sensible, then they would seek out approval to conduct human tests with people who were fully aware that it was experimental, fully aware that there were unforeseen things and that they were taking a risk and that they were voluntarily taking on that risk. And then we would conduct our studies, and then other studies would be conducted to see if the findings could be, confirmed or denied, or if there was, something more afoot. And if there were differences, we had to examine why. Was there a difference in methodology? What about the people who were being tested? Is there something about their medical condition that could have made a difference? We went through all that process with a fine-tooth comb, and then, several years, a decade or two down the line, and then it might be released to the general public if it actually passed muster, and and things were done honestly. So that's traditionally how it works. With all the COVID stuff, it was let's pump you full of chemicals that we haven't studied and haven't gone through this process, and we're going to tell you everything's fine. And by the way, if anything goes wrong, we're going to tell you can't actually sue us. And then perhaps later on, if things become awkward, then we'll do studies about alleged side effects. That's what's happening now. You see, instead of asking permission, they've decided to, well, I guess not even ask for forgiveness. They just did what they did. Apparently, we're just text subjects for them, and yeah, they think that's how they want to do things now. They don't want our consent. That also drives me crazy. With as much, we need to have a talk about creating consent culture. And then the moment people were afraid of an illness that has an over 99% survival rate, suddenly we didn't want to talk about consent anymore. It was everyone must do as they're told and conform and not ask questions. And if you're a doctor or in that scientific medical field, if you're not towing the line, we're going to make sure no one can hear what you have to say. We're going to make sure that people are shut down. No. These are exactly the kind of people who should be held accountable. Now, with some people with accountability, it really depends on the degree of their guilt. I mean, if it was someone in your community who was treating you badly, a bit of a cold shoulder until they demonstrated some actual sincere regret, that would probably do it. But for these people who are actually in the medical and scientific field, for the people in government who did this, and honestly, for law enforcement who enforce these unconstitutional edicts, there have to be legal ramifications. And if we're not having them now, then rest assured, at some point down the road, we are going to have that, because I don't think we can move forward as a society until that happened. Yet people need to be punished. I mean, flat out, they need to be punished. And I think the degree of involvement really determines the degree and the form of what that punishment should ultimately be. So, there's that. Now, in other news, One of the things I've been doing is I've been, trying to get everything on the channel kind of wrapped up for the year. So I'm doing a lot of prep work, a lot of planning. My goal is this week to essentially have all of the videos, the planned videos for the month of November already recorded, apart from, the live streams, obviously, those happen live. But everything that's pre-planned, I want to make sure I get that done by the end of this week if possible. Then from there, I want to get kind of a jump start on not just the post for December, the my cheerful good morning post on the server, as well as the day's astrology, tarot card of the day, magical correspondence of the day, things of that nature. Not only do I want that prepped, and I've already begun that process, but I want to make sure I have some video outlines squared away so that by the time I've done my decorating and I have a place that's fit to be seen, I can just immediately get on that. The goal is to have all of December pre-recorded by the end of the second week of December. So cross your fingers for me. That's what I'm going to try to do. And of course, I want to make sure that I get a plan for next year and that we really hit the ground running in 2023. But also in the line with planning, it was suggested to me yesterday because a conversation came up about the Second Amendment and the just the philosophical underpinnings of self-defense, as well as practical forms of self-defense and a working knowledge of weaponry. That came up, and someone suggested that I needed to do an episode on this channel. Well, I can pontificate quite a bit about the Second Amendment itself and the moral justification and the moral necessity for self-defense. I can do that. I'm very grounded in that. I yammer on about it all the time. But when it comes to the operation and of firearms and different forms of self-defense, in that arena, I am very much a student. Not only would it be presumptuous of me to try to lead the conversation on that, I would feel really dishonest because I'm not going to present myself as some kind of expert on something that I am very much learning. And honestly, a lot of us are on that same learning curve. So what I am hoping to do is get some more well-informed and more experienced voices on with me to the channel, do a group live stream once we're able to decide who would be willing to participate, because I know a live stream that is probably a little bit worrisome for someone who's not accustomed to it. But also when we can actually get our schedules to align. So I'm not sure I would look for this conversation on this side of the new year, but it's on the docket. I think that is an important conversation to have. I just need to make sure that I'm surrounded with the right people to have it, people who are qualified to speak and who have earned the right to speak on such subjects. So that's pretty much where I'm at. I'll have them on. Essentially, I'll be hosting the discussion and probably asking some very rookie beginners questions that perhaps others in the audience might be thinking themselves. So we have that to look forward to. Next thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit was a link that Georgia Liberty placed on the server the other day. It was from the Academy of Ideas. That's a channel on YouTube. And the title was Nietzsche and Nihilism. And in the video, the narrator was really talking about Nietzsche's premise that the philosophies, religious, and political movements that promote a true world narrative more often than not end with people and institutions becoming very nihilistic and having a sense of emptiness, a lack of meaning, and a sense of perpetual dissatisfaction and pessimism at the world because the world as it is not matching this idea of the true world that they think ought to be. So I would strongly encourage people to watch that and really meditate it about. And I suppose I just want to talk about it a little bit, just because it really got me to thinking about the consequences of our philosophies and our ideas. I do think that we are in a season in which we are reaping a lot of consequences and ideas of things that people believe, whether idealistically or pragmatically. Reality has been putting a lot of ideas to the test, and it would be the biggest mistake at all not to acknowledge where these ideas really lead people. What kind of behaviors are we seeing stem from it? What are the consistent problems? What are the consistent successes? And just being honest about it and really asking ourselves if it is time to do a little bit of reassessment. And I know that's not particularly fun, especially after all these years of we've been getting so many messages of you need to question everything. Yeah, you can't be comfortable. We have to undo everything that's been done and redo stuff and all this other things. I mean, people are intellectually exhausted. At least that's the perception I have. People are tired, and I think a lot of people are getting really worn out with the constant nagging about how they need to change. Because I know I certainly have felt that way. I am worried about it. Oh, what's Wicked Conservative saying? So sorry you didn't like his voice. Oh, that's going on in the comments. Sorry. Apparently, apparently, one of our friends was listening to that video and had an issue with the narrator's voice. I hear you there. Not every single voice is agreeable to every single person's ears. You should hear me go on about some other YouTube creators and their cadence and their accents and just their general mode of expressing myself. Oh, sometimes it's not what they say, it's just literally how it is said. But anyway, about ideas and consequences. One of the things that I really love about the pagan faith is that it is all about testing things against reality and understanding that things come and go in cycles. And and I suppose some people could misinterpret this as an ultra fatalistic doomsaying of no matter how good things are, things will always get worse and you'll never escape and things will never be perfect. I mean, I suppose you could take that view. But on the other hand, I find great comfort in that idea that there is a season for all things. There's a season for you to feel that sense of being on top of the world. There's that season for you to be inspired. There's that season for you to really put your head down and work towards a goal and make something happen. There's a season for you to experience failures and to learn about why it failed and what you learned about yourself and how you can why you react the way that you do. How can you react differently possibly? What is there to be learned? Was there anything to be done? Sometimes there isn't. Sometimes there actually are no-win scenarios, and those no-win scenarios are the consequence of trying to accomplish something that is not something that the natural order actually allows. I think there's a lot of cause for reflection in the idea of cycles, whether we're talking about nature, our patterns of behavior in life, or just existence, the patterns of existence. There's a lot of things to learn, and there's a lot of comfort to be had because let's say you are on that low point, and I'm sure many of people certainly feel that way now. I mean, the economy is no joke. There's a lot of stressors in society. Just hard to say whether or not our society is going to stay glued together, if it will be in any kind of recognizable form, if it's going to morph into something, probably something awful, if some of these people have their way. But, I get it. I get the people who feel black-pilled right now. I get the people who feel uncertain and who are just looking for comfort or some kind of stability. But I would say even to those people, because things go in cycles, because all things do end, then even this does. Even the worst challenges of your life, even the worst heartache you may ever experience, or the most mental distress, all of these things eventually end. You just have to keep trotting along. And as you're doing that trotting along, it's giving you that opportunity to plant different seeds for the future. And that's why it's so important to do our little periodic behavioral autopsies. How did I arrive here? What were all of the steps that got me here? And how many of those steps were actually a good idea? This is how we cultivate wisdom. And it's important to own the mistakes that we made and also to recognize what factors were actually more external. And we can always learn how to react more productively to these external influences. But it's okay to acknowledge that some things were just part of the environment that we were in. We don't always have the best conditions for what we're trying to accomplish, and acknowledge that, and don't let yourself off the hook about the part that you've played and how things have turned out, especially if they've turned out suboptimal. But at the same time, don't take the responsibility of the entire universe upon yourself. You're responsible for you and how you react to others. Other people are responsible for themselves. And I think that's also the balancing point that I think some people struggle with. I think there's a fear of, if I'm acknowledging that someone else played a role and is also at fault or has had involvement in this, does that mean I'm letting myself off the hook? So I think we need to also reassess how we handle ourselves emotionally, which isn't very fun because we've been on an emotional free-for-all in our society for quite a while. And so learning when that maybe indulging our feelings isn't necessarily the best thing, and of course it's not good to just completely try to shut your emotions off. For one, you're not going to be successful. You're not Spock. And for two, even if you were somehow successful, that would not be a healthy way of being, and it would not be a successful way of being, and it would not solve your problems. It would create new ones. So learning how to live within these feelings and get a better grip on when it might be a good time to let them show, when's a good time really to maybe rein things in a little bit. That takes wisdom. It takes a lot of wisdom, and it takes practice. It takes trial and error, and it takes someone having the bravery to see that process through, because it's going to be lifelong. I mean, you could be 95 years old. You're still going to be learning this, at least if you are permitting yourself to do so. So, on a somewhat lighter but also sort of kind of related note, I must confess to one of my guilty pleasures. I do like watching The Crown on Netflix. uh, a lot of my DNA came directly from the British Isles, and even on my mom's side, the areas of Germany that her family immigrated from, it's very much where the Angles and the Saxons originated from. So it's part of my blood. I it really is. So I have an interest in the royal family, whether it's a factual account or a more fictionalized account. But this season covered essentially the end of Charles and Diana's marriage. That was really the main thrust of the season. Everything else was just kind of on the peripheral to that. And I think that the writers intended to portray Diana in an ultra sympathetic light and to present Charles in a very villainous light. I think that was their intention, and I think they tried to do that. There were some moments of balance where they pulled back from that, but I think overall they wanted you to feel more for Diana than you did for Charles. At least that was the impression. I don't live inside their heads. I don't know for sure, but that's the feeling I got. But it had quite the opposite effect upon me, if that was their intention. I came away feeling far less sympathetic to Diana than I ever have. Now, on balance, on the whole, if we were looking at them as, well, historical people, because if you are part of the British monarchy, you are by definition a historical and public figure. The real trouble with Charles and Diana, all the things that went wrong in their marriage, those were just symptoms. The real problem was rooted in the fact of complete incompatibility and a lack of emotional involvement. And I do think that was a great mistake that Charles was prevented from marrying Camilla. She's the person who he was always meant to be with. And whenever I see them out together in public, I'm not just seeing, a couple, carrying out their duties for the kingdom and doing what the royals do. I just, there's something about the energy between them. They were always meant to be together. And their paths took a turn to where they had to color outside the lines quite a bit in order to make that happen. But if they had been left alone and simply made that decision to begin with, all of the drama would have been avoided. But if that had happened, there would be no Prince William, no marriage to Catherine. There wouldn't be those three adorable children, and really there wouldn't be that future for the British monarchy that I think they have. That you don't know how it would have had. What if Charles and Camilla had children together? We don't know that they would have turned out, particularly the heir. We don't know if the heir would have turned out as well adjusted as Prince William certainly appears to be. So, all things happen for a reason, but there's lots of lessons to take away from it. But the way that Diana was portrayed, I found her characterization very interesting, because I think all of her good qualities, I think they did a good job of showing. I think she is someone who did enjoy the charitable work that she did, the hospital work that she did. I think she did genuinely like connecting to other people just on a human level. I think she excelled at that. But at the same time, her immaturity, her unwillingness to accept the realities of her situation and the realities of what it means to be part of the royal family, and just the realities of life. I think that really showed through. I mean, she was in that mindset of the world how she thought it would be was not matching the world that was, and she focused so much energy on trying to bend the world to her will, and she paid the price for it. She was very miserable in life. She had a lot of problems that contributed to her own emotional instability, and because she never grew up the way I think a lot of other members of the royal family did. And I don't mean into upbringing. I mean, at a certain point, they accepted the reality of the position that they were born in. I don't think Diana ever quite recognized the responsibility of the position she was born in. And I say this as, as an outsider, obviously, just an outside observer, but that's certainly how it looks to me. She just couldn't accept it. She wanted her idealized world that I think was far more rooted in childish desires and maturity and wanting things that simply were not possible. You can't have this effusive, expansive, cuddly family life when so much of the family is based really on the idea of providing service. All the charitable work that they do, all the meetings with different world organizations and foreign leaders that they have to present a fairly neutral or at least a parliament approved aspect to. That's all done in service of the nation. One of the reasons why the royal family continues to exist is because they are, and the crown is something that is beyond the government and beyond politics. It's meant to be this unifying, stabilizing, eternal force. And also by them meeting all of these various people who are very prominent in the world, it's about creating working relationships or gaining some insight, and that's one of the reasons why the sovereign and the prime minister have so many meetings that they do. I think a lot of it is comparing notes and saying, I learned this about that person. And it's also why the royal family is supposed to be neutral in public so that they can do this kind of work. And the idea is by building relationships that transcend political moods, it's hopefully works to the benefit of the British people. Now we have a lot of people in the government and a lot of people within the UK in general who aren't necessarily what I would call patriotic. So they are facing certainly a crisis of the soul. I hope they come out of it, but that's just some of the reflections that I came out of when I was watching The Crown. And I noticed in the chat, Amanda was asking, could this explain Harry's attraction to Meghan and mum replacement? I 100% agree. I think that is absolutely what that is. I do think that Meghan, certainly while they were dating, was actively building that link in his head. I think she very much uses that to her advantage. But when I think of Meghan Markle, I think she wishes she could be Diana. I think she tries to fake her way into becoming that kind of figure, but she lacks all of the good qualities that Diana had. And I'm not someone who's anti Diana. I just don't think she was a good fit for the job. Wasn't a good fit for the royal family, for now King Charles. Wasn't a good fit for the role of Princess of Wales. And Meghan, I don't think Meghan ever really tried. Say what you will of Charles and Diana and the mistakes they made during their marriage. There was still also years, more than a decade's worth of sustained effort to, if not to make things right between them on the private level, but to at least make it work in public. And it worked for a while, and they tried. I don't think Meghan tried. I think she thought she was going to waltz in into an institution that has existed 3 times longer than her country of origin and start telling it what's what. Well, that's not going to happen. Not only is that not the function of the British crown, also just think how it looks. Americans, we declared our independence and said, we don't want nothing to do with you. We don't need you, blah, blah, blah. Off we go. Okay. And then periodically we have a few Americans marrying into the royal family, and then they don't understand why the royal family isn't changing for them. Could it be that there are serious cultural issues on that front? That it actually does make a difference whether you are brought up in a constitutional monarchy versus a constitutional republic. That there's a difference in culture and mindset and how you think things ought to work and the degree of influence that individuals expect to have. If I was to move over to the UK, I wouldn't think that I was going to change anything. If anything, I would be there to enjoy the things that I have always admired and, just kind of bite my tongue and take with whatever was going on, just because I was in their country and just because my ancestors came from there, I did not genetically inherit the right to determine the course of how that country evolves. So And that's something that I think was completely lost on Meghan, and not just in the context of the royal family. I see her very much having that attitude in the United States as well. She has her vision of how she thinks we should be, and a lot of us don't particularly agree with her. And even people in the Hollywood circles and who lean left, uh, I don't think she is nearly as popular as what she hoped she would be, and I think it's very sad the way she keeps, hanging on with that pathetic little podcast of hers. And I know anyone could criticize me saying, "Well, she gets more views than you do, Brugantia. She gets paid, you don't." Very, very true. However, when people tune into my channel, I hope it's not because they're anticipating watching a train wreck, or they're not just doing oppositional research to see how badly she sucks at that. And one thing about not being paid for what I do is that I can always say, I'm an amateur. I'm just learning. I'm just doing my thing. And if people enjoy it, that's wonderful. But if they don't, I mean, no one's forcing them to be here. She needs her audience in that way, because she cannot sustain this without getting some actual real support. And her latest episode, I was listening to commentary on its topic because I couldn't bring myself to listen. I cannot bring myself to listen to the Meghan Markles of this world, but it was about the B word and how she didn't like the word bitch, and how traumatic it is and how degrading it is, and blah 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 blah. And all I thought was, speak for yourself, chickadee. For some of us, bitch is a title of honor. It means you are not to be trifled with. You are a force of nature. You are formidable, and people know that they are going to have to deal with you on terms that you also find acceptable. It just means that people don't walk all over you. And that's something that has to be earned. That's not something that you can go on a victim, campaign and look at all my pain and suffering. You don't get to be able to be a bitch that way. At most, you could possibly be a whiny bitch, but you would never have the full impact of what the word bitch really means. But of course, Meghan doesn't get that. No surprise there. So, to finish up, as I toss my pen into the netherworld, have a little question to entertain us, and I might also put up a poll on this on YouTube and the Gilded Group and all the various other platforms that like put up polls. But I think people can relate to this question, and it is: how do we stay informed and aware of what's going on around us without being driven completely crazy? I am asking this very, very seriously. I 100% not only welcome feedback, but I need feedback because I think it's time that we start comparing notes, because there are days when I end up completely ignoring what's going on just because I can't take the crazy. Too much of that energy is getting into my system. I don't necessarily have 12 hours a day to meditate the crazy out. So coping skills, that's what we need. One of the things I've been trying is, limiting the amount of political and social commentary news that I really take in. I try to be aware of what's going on and keep my finger on the pulse as best I can, but I am also trying to find the point at which I just say, no, I'm done for the day. We can pick this up tomorrow if I think it's still going to be important. I see how this fits in the general pattern of things. I got the gist of it, but I don't necessarily need to give my full attention to it, because I do think that it's important during this time of transition and everything we're going through to be able to really manage and maintain having complete personalities, of still fully embracing life. Because if we don't remember what it is we fight these political and cultural and sometimes even religious battles for, if we don't hold on to that, we're going to lose. We are setting ourselves up for failure. And one of the difficulties, because it feels like we're all living for a cause right now, and as someone who comes from the trenches, I was literally raised to live for a cause in the Jehovah's Witness community. I have to tell you, that has a really detrimental effect on a person. It can destroy marriages. I watched that firsthand in the JW organization. People don't always necessarily mature or evolve through the years the way that they should, because all their energy is just focused on, I must give it all for the cause. But they never really become, and since all of their life experience is tied up with their cause, they never really become that well-rounded, developed human being. And as a pagan, I understand just how much of a point that is, because that is the goal of our whole spirituality. Become that well rounded person, experience and embrace life as much as you can. Learn how to love your difficulties and the battles that are yours to fight, and use that to make something of yourself. Propel yourself from that. Meet it. Fight it, do it. And then as you circle back around incarnation after incarnation, that makes you more and more complete. You have more wisdom, you have a better mastery over yourself, and that is the true source of power for a human being. Whether you are, a plain pagan, just a theistic pagan, or if you are someone who is a witch, whatever it is that your role plays in this spiritual journey, becoming the most of that and seizing onto it. That's what it's all about. And we can't do that if we become one dimensional. And I really see a lot of people in politics, and commentators are particularly guilty on this, of becoming very one dimensional, and they can never seem to take this mental break from things. And you need to be able to take a break from it without turning it into escapism and as an excuse to not deal with reality. And that's really where I feel that I'm at, of where is that line, walking that line. Am I doing all right? Am I not doing so all right? I really depend and rely on the people around me to kind of keep me on check on that and let me know when I'm leaning too far one way or too far another. And I think you've got to have people around you. I mean, we have to have tribe of some sort, uh, especially when it comes to this particular subject. I think we do. Because once you start losing yourself like that, it takes so much to rebuild yourself after that point. And this is also something that I can speak with some authority, because that's exactly the process I went through after I left the Jehovah's Witness cult. I had to learn how to human. I had to ask myself the big questions. Who was I? What did I want? How was I going to get there? And was that goal actually worthwhile? Of what did it mean to live a full life? Especially because you got to think about it. I was 30 when I was leaving, and I was 31 when I had completed that. When I was left, when I was real and truly gone. So that's, well, let's say if I live to be 90, that's one third of my life right there. And to have spent and focused so much of your energy, a third of your life, on something that you ultimately walked away from and saw as being very harmful to yourself, detrimental to others, and not something you wanted to have anything to do with, and having to rebuild yourself, it was like going through a second adolescence. And I've been seeing that other ex Jehovah's Witnesses and people who have had a radical change in their personal politics have also essentially been going through this same second adolescence, this moment of discovery and uncertainty, and feeling awkward and not feeling comfortable in your own skin, having a lot of issues with having confidence in yourself, and also having real difficulties of having a vision of what you want your life to be and specific goals to work towards, because you're going against all of your previous programming. You've thrown all of that out the window and you're having to rebuild it from scratch. That is no small achievement, and it is something that is ongoing. And of course, the later in life you start this, the more you're also battling that sense of, I'm out of time, I'm out of time, I'm out of time. I should have already figured out these things. And then you beat yourself up, and it's this whole swirling of self-loathing and problems, and it's really very counterproductive, which also goes back to what I was saying a moment ago about needing to learn how to rein in our emotions when letting them loose is probably not a constructive thing to do. So it's a journey. So I guess what I will do is I will put this up as a poll of, how do we stay informed and aware of our surroundings without being driven completely crazy? I would really love to have a broader discussion about this, because maybe we have some ideas that could help each other. Maybe if what I've done to help myself up to this point, maybe it not work may not work well for you, but maybe you've discovered something that would be more productive. Maybe you could be the one who helps me or helps somebody else. But at any rate, when we compare notes like this, I think it helps us all move forward, because we start thinking about the pros and cons of all approaches. And we also start thinking about what have the outcomes of these approaches been, because, the proof is always in the pudding. You can see it. So we could possibly help each other stay sane, not give in to all of the madness we have swirling around us, and you know, let's talk. Let's have that conversation. So I think I am going to end it here. Please visit us at the Gilded Group. We oh no, I forgot to put the link in the description box below. It's all in all of my other videos. And if you write to me at brigantiablackbird at proton.mail, at protonmail.com rather, you can just ask me for a link, and we can get you all set up and we can get you involved in the community, because as Wiccan Conservative just said, sharing is caring indeed. And not only that, as we can build up community together. I mean, we can't always be together physically because we've got this distance of being in different states, but we can certainly come together in spirit and offer each other the support that we can and help each other along the journey. So thank you everyone for joining me. I appreciate that. If you haven't already, please smash that like button. If you leave me a little comment down below, that probably help with the YouTube algorithm and all that stuff. And if you enjoy anything that I have to share, please feel free, put it on your social media links and all that good stuff. Helps get more eyeballs on the channel, which means that hopefully we get more interaction, and that can lead to better conversations. So hope to see you on Gilded later, and bye-bye, everyone.